Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly and I'm a mixed media artist who specializes in gouache paint, ink work, and sometimes I do other stuff. In this week's video, I'll be showing you how I painted these fire butterflies? Butterflies on fire? Butterflies emitting fire? I don't know. But if you're interested in how I did this, keep on watching. Now, the concept for this whole painting is going to consist of an inner portion, which is an oval, being fully in gouache paint, and then a frame on the outside that is oval shaped that I'm going to illustrate entirely with ink. And to do that, I wanted to make sure the oval was even and that I had something to trace that was totally symmetrical, because let me tell you, doing geometric stuff that requires perfect precision in shapes like that, it's not my thing. I mean, it could be my thing if I invested in the tools, like a good compass or whatever, but I'm like, no. So what I did was I cut out some printer paper that is the exact size of my illustration board here, which is 5 inches by 7 inches. I folded it in 4 ways, cut out an arch, and this made the perfect oval shape that is consistent and symmetrical on all 4 sides. I then went ahead and repeated this process once I traced that outer ring onto my illustration board, and I made an even smaller oval from that same piece of paper. What this is going to do is going to give me the width for the border, so that way I know where to stop with the paint. Also, side note, I used some crystals to weigh down the paper as I traced and to adjust. That's something I actually learned while working at a frame shop years ago, was to weigh down the print, of course protecting it with some tissue paper underneath. That will help you get more of an accurate adjustment as you're making sure it's totally centered on the mat board, or in this case on the illustration board, so that if you sneeze, it won't go flying off, right? Hi, I had this ruler since college, and it's the only one I haven't lost. Every time I buy a smaller ruler that is a lot more practical, according to most of the sizes of my paintings, which tend to be 11 by 14 or under, I lose every single ruler I get. Anyways, so I'm measuring because I want to section out the design on the border for later. So my idea is to have the sun and some stars on top, and then I want to have the moon and its moon phases below, and on the sides I want to put in a banner as above so below on both of the different sides. I'm going to go more into detail on the border process probably in next week's video because we don't have time for that today. With a mechanical pencil, I'm just sketching out the shapes of the butterflies and where I want the flames to be placed. I really liked the idea of having longer flames around the corners of the wings, so I added that. Then I'm going into my underpainting. Now, in this stage, there was an abundance of experimenting, right? Typically, what I do is I either use watercolor or watercolor pencils to start my underpainting, which has always worked for me, and I typically do this with a wet on wet method. Now, I kind of leaned into this and thought maybe I'll do more of a simple piece. So ultimately my goal was to see like, hey, can I get this done really fast? How long will this take me? Now, I am not a watercolorist, ironically, because I use gouache, but I use gouache for its properties of being very opaque. I don't deal with a whole lot of translucency in my work, And one thing about watercolor, if you're gonna be like, yes, I am committing to a watercolor look in my painting, you need to give up your sense of control to the medium. You need to stop, all right? As you can see, I did not do that. I did not stop. I said, I want to move this around how I want it to. But with watercolor, you're at the mercy of water and how the pigment disperses through the water. I probably could have left the background as is. I was going for a galaxy nebula look, swirling around the butterflies, and it does look good how it is. Ultimately though, I was not happy with it, and I think it's because it didn't feel like me. It didn't feel like my sense of expression. I think I needed to experiment with this just to see how I felt. I'm also thinking about, hey, would I be able to do a painting a day if I approached it this way? Kind of mindset. Kind of preparing myself for Inktober and like all that other stuff. And the answer is probably not. And it's not because, you know, I did get an okay result from using watercolor, but it didn't feel right. I can't explain it. It didn't feel true to my soul's expression, if that makes sense. And so as I layered up some colors, I realized, you know what, I'm just gonna approach this how I would with any painting and just color block it how I would. As you can see, I'm trying to figure out how can I get this look that I want in my head, but still making it watercolor. It's not working because you're treating it like gouache, Carly, and the process of watercolor just doesn't make me super happy. I like using it as a underpainting or blending medium for gouache, but other than that, it just was not working out. So I opted to just black out the background, which ultimately I do like better. It feels more in line with my expression through art. It feels more like a really old painting, and that's the kind of vibe I like. All these colors that I applied previously did blend in later on when I blacked out the background to create a really pretty, like, deep navy blue color, so all was not completely lost. Here I was seeing if I could blend in the outer yellow glow into a teal, into a blue, into a black, and because I was forcefully trying to make things blend, it wound up just building up into full opaque gouache paint instead of just translucent watercolor. So yeah, at that point I was like, screw it, I don't like this. And yeah, I did try blending the edges a little bit and tried seeing how far I could go with that, but nah. Since I was getting frustrated with the background, I decided to shift my focus onto the subject matter, the butterflies. What I did was I created a red to orange to yellow gradient across the wings and focused more of that yellow in areas where I know there's going to be some light or glow from the fire singeing at the butterfly wings. So I focused more of that bright yellow as a highlight in those areas. That is my dog. He's my intern. He has a dog bed on my table, so you know how it is. The gouache paint I used to highlight the wings and to create that really bright yellow is the Cadmium Lemon Winsor & Newton Designer Gouache. And this is a good shade. It's just, if you order it on Amazon, make sure that you have yours shaken up and thoroughly mixed, because I don't know if this was just sitting in a warehouse for a very long time, but it kind of separated from the binder. So I had to go in and like really shake it up. Just letting you know, I've had that happen with quite a few Winsor & Newton paints. I think it's because they're just made at such mass that quality control is a little bit harder, so I don't know, but that's what I used. I also outlined the veins and design in the butterfly wings with some ivory black from M. Company. They're my favorite paint brand, by the way. Very good. Their watercolors actually have honey in them to create a really beautiful gradient. So just a side note if you're interested. But I used a mixture of their cobalt blue and ivory black to create a little bit of a muted situation for the black. And I also mixed in a little bit of that orange, which is complementary to the blue, so it kind of muddies it. Essentially, I made a really deep brown color. And that's because I don't want it to be super harsh black outlines, because that can flatten, the butterfly wings. What I really wanted was just something close to black that'll outline the wings, but still look like it's lightened from being illuminated by fire. And the farther side wings that are getting more of that light source, I'm making sure that the outlines there and the darkest darks in general are a little bit lighter, and that the highlights are a little bit more overexposed due to it getting more light in general. Once I have the background completely blacked out, well, it's not really black, but you know what I mean, I then went in with a golden yellow shade, and the yellow I used was Cadmium Yellow by M. Company. It's definitely more of a warmer yellow. It reads a little bit orangey, like a dandelion. I mixed that with a tiny bit of Naphthol Red from M. Company as well to create a nice orange color. I placed that around the edges where I intend on painting more flames on the edges of the butterfly wings. And then I went in with a damp brush. I'm using a pretty small brush. It's damp. I dipped it in my water and blotted off excess water on both sides, and I lightly feathered that out into the background. What I'm trying to achieve here is that look of a subtle glow from, let's say, a candle light, because the flames are smaller and it's not like a forest fire, There's gonna be this little glow. Then I'm adding some red to the base of the flames. Later on, I'm going to add, finally, some yellow. So I'm really trying to replicate that gradient that flames tend to have from red to yellow. That's why the flames right now just look like hot Cheeto dust. I'm also using that cadmium lemon yellow, which is a very bright, true primary yellow, and I'm applying that in areas where there's going to be really high points of highlights from the flames. At this point, I'm getting more into the detailed stage, so I'm getting a lot more specific with my placements, and I end up later on, I think pretty soon, I end up using a nail art brush. I'll point it out when I do get it. But I'm really just working back and forth between shadows and highlights at this point. At the detail stage, you get more specific in really small areas, especially on this small of a painting. Something I did want to add to the underside of the butterfly wing is to kind of create this backlit look on the wings. The underneath side of this one that's further down, I want it to look like it has a glow from behind it. So I'm making sure that you see more of these desaturated colors, almost like it's away from the light source in the areas where it's closer to the butterfly body. I'm making sure to use more desaturated reds in these shaded areas rather than a vibrant straight out of the tube red. I'm also making sure that there is some shadows coming around the veins and the wings. This just really mimics that look of, for instance, a leaf being backlit from the sun in the sky. You know how you see all of the veins and they're kind of silhouetted? I'm kind of making a low-key version of that. I want a very diffused glow, and I want it to get a lot more vibrant the closer it gets to the butterflies and the flames. It's requiring a few layers of blending to do this, just because of how annoyingly specific I am about it, but I am blurring out the edges, and then I'm going to crisp them back up when I start to actually render the flames themselves. I decided I liked the feather edge I created and started making more intentional shapes where I want the flames to go, where they're going to be pointed, the motion of the butterfly. I really had all that in mind before going to the next step where I actually really start rendering the flames, and this involves using a lot more of that cadmium lemon color, and I'm placing that in the center of all of the pre-established shapes I created with that orange paint. In the middle of all of those shapes, I'm applying that yellow because I want there to be that diffused orange edge to all of them, and I really want the yellow to stand out in the very center because that is how flames behave, right? You can see in this picture what I mean by that. At this point, I'm using my detailed brush for blending, but for more precise application, I am using my nail art brush, which is a very small brush that is really good. It's intended for pinstriping for nails, so you can imagine it's very small. But it comes in handy with precise things like this. With my nail brush, I'm also picking up some ivory black and I'm putting it at the very edges of the butterfly wings right underneath the fire because I'm trying to create this look almost like a piece of paper that's on fire. The very edge looks like it's smoked and burnt, and then you get these glowing embers at the very edges. So that's why I'm using black in this case. I thought that it was a very small difference, but it made a huge impact on the piece overall. For the final touch, I went in with some titanium white gouache paint from Mgram, and I'm placing that in the very center of some of the larger flames along the butterfly wings. And I'm placing this in the very center and blending it in a little bit so it's not completely stark white, but it just enhances that glow even more. It makes it look overexposed. You get the idea. It's the highest point of highlights. You don't want to place this absolutely everywhere, just in places where you think it would really be glowing the most. And with that being said, they're done. I mean, the painting's not done, but the butterflies, yeah, they're good to go. Next week or so, I'll get into the rest of the painting and my process behind it. But if you guys liked this week's video, please give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing, and I will see you next week. Bye!